Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome in to a wild card weekend edition of Monday Night Football, Showdown style. Fun one coming up to round out what's been a really fun weekend of playoff football. To start this week, we've got Tom Brady hosting the Dallas Cowboys. Tom Brady was 7-0 career, I believe, against the Dallas Cowboys to wrap up this wild card weekend. Join as always to talk about the one game Showdown slate is Cody Main. Cody, how you doing?
I'm good. I really did have my doubts about this wildcard weekend, given the fact that we had Tyler Huntley, given the fact that we had Skylar Thompson. But I mean, it seems like every single one of these games over delivered on their promises. We got a really good shootout, unexpected shootout in Miami and Buffalo, more back and forth game than we probably expected with Baltimore in Cincinnati. 2.5 point spread tonight, 45.5 point total the last I had looked. So I'm geared up for this game, man. I am geared up for Tom Brady in the playoffs. I'm excited to see this one tonight.
Yeah, me too. I'm looking forward to it. Obviously, well, I'll start with this. You mentioned Tyler Huntley and Skylar Thompson on this slate, but who else was maybe the best quarterback in the world? Daniel Jones. So it's we've been Danny Dimes guys forever, and honestly, I didn't even think this ceiling was there. We knew that coming in with Dable and that there was an upside there, but man, I'm pumped today, boys and girls. Obviously I'm a Giants fan. It was a lot of fun yesterday. This whole season's felt like gravy. And this isn't a Giants podcast, but I just want to talk about it for 2 minutes because I can. So there you go. We'll see. Now tonight, obviously I have a rooting interest as a Giants fan, but I do think this is going to be a fun game here.
Yeah.
Cowboys coming in as road favorites. You mentioned 45.5 point total. What are your thoughts macro-wise? You could see there on the chart, not many people going to look on either side, going to play for a full-on onslaught here. How are you looking at this slate macro-wise?
Yeah, you can see 5.6% Tampa Bay onslaughts, 5.5% Cowboys onslaughts. A huge chunk of the lineups tonight are going to be 3-3. And a lot of that is just because the value sets up so well on both sides that it gets really tough to build lineups that you feel really good about when you're just trying to jam in one team, because you're going to miss out inevitably on some of the really nice value pieces on both sides. And credit to DraftKings for pricing the slate in the way that they did. That really sets up to funnel, the most common roster construction that we'll see tonight. And for me, a tournament player, I do want a little bit of exposure to both sides. I want to play into the Tom Brady narrative and play into Tom Brady in the playoffs. He's got all of his weapons healthy. We have playoff Lenny. We have Rashad White. We have got a really cheap Kate Otten, and I think that's going to set up well for some of the Tampa Bay onslaught type stuff. But, coming back, we've seen this Tampa Bay team really struggle at times this season, and it wouldn't shock me tonight against a really tough Dallas defense. And then Dallas, conversely, on the opposite side, you have plenty of options there that I think can outscore their price tag. So for me, someone who's going to be building lineups in the solver, I want to set minimum exposures to the 1-5, to the 5-1s, and probably get double the field on both, 10 to 12% minimum for each feels nice to me, and then I'll kind of run it from there. But yeah, it's nice to see these really low numbers on both sides when you can see the game playing in a way where the onslaught type stuff works out.
Agreed. And I really agree with you. And Cho Coldwell mentions in the chat, a lot of variance he feels like in this game. And if that's the case, which I agree, I can see there's a wide range of outcomes for the way this game can play out. I think a really wide range of outcomes. I can see it be really close. And I can see either team, putting their foot on the other team's throat. Like Dallas kind of limping into the playoffs here. Tampa Bay finding their stride a little bit. It's Tom Brady in the playoffs. The Bucs are at home. I do think there's no doubt that Dallas is the more talented team. And maybe we are sleeping on them a little bit for how good they really were all season, just kind of with, recency bias. But you can really see this game going in a ton of different directions, which is why if we're only getting 10% total on 5-1s, I agree that we should be doubling that up if we can, at least at one side, if you feel better about one side or the other. I mentioned, I think Dallas maybe, comes in stronger than we think tonight. Like then play 10, 15%, 5-1 Dallas, something like that. I don't mind doing that at all. You see the two 4s and the 3-3s, obviously 3-3, as you mentioned, we were talking a little bit right before with salary, pretty loose, but also just a lot of value on both sides that can, make for nice 3-3 lineups, play into this close spread. So you're going to see that as the most popular construction here tonight.
Yeah, and by no means does 40% 3-3 scare me away from having any exposure to 3-3s. I just think you need to be more cognizant of the type of teams that you're building in those 3-3s, because if you're using an optimizer, if you're just looking at projections and hand building even, it's going to funnel you into a relatively common roster construction. So I would just make an extra point to try and be unique, whether that means leaving salary on the table, trying to find one of those low-owned pieces, or at least some type of roster combination that together will be low owned, even in a popular type roster construction. Before we get into position by position, the one last thing kind of from a macro perspective that I wanted to mention, and you kind of alluded to it too, was loose pricing. And as we get down here into the player by player stuff, you'll see that the top priced players on this slate projecting for 50 to 60-ish% ownership. I think because of the way the slate was priced, you'll see that come up. The quarterbacks probably will push a little bit higher. Some of the top skill position guys will push a little bit higher. So that's just one thing to keep in mind as you're going through your builds, that the slate it's not easy to build the best teams that you like, but it's priced loosely enough at the bottom that I think it will push up those more expensive options in terms of total ownership.
Yep, I think that's a great point. All right, let's dive in. Starting at quarterback here, obviously two guys that we are very familiar with, both on Showdown slates all the time and just in general as fantasy assets over the years. Dak Prescott, as I mentioned, the aforementioned road favorites, is $400 more than Tom Brady. Prescott's definitely been struggling of late. He's got this interception streak that people are really making note of. That said, this Dallas team is still a high firepowered offense. And I would be definitely looking for both these guys in cash. How are you approaching quarterback tonight?
Yeah, totally agree. Let's start with the cash conversation first, because it is kind of easy just to knock this one out from the very beginning. Given the price tags on the skill position players below them and around them, I prefer just jamming in both quarterbacks. I think it provides the safest floor ceiling combo. And we do have some high target share type guys on both sides that can really rack up points in PPR friendly sites like DraftKings. But for me, I just want the safety of both quarterbacks. So for me, starting Tom Brady, Dak Prescott in every cash game lineup tonight, and just kind of moving on from there. Now, when we move on to tournaments, like starting with Dak, the problem for me is this is started to be, and it's kind of been this way throughout the course of the regular season. This is just a low pass rate offense, and it's not what we expected coming in, I don't think. But given some of the deficiencies with their secondary and tertiary wide receivers and relative strength of their rushing attack, they ranked 26th in situation neutral pass rate, 25th in PROE. So to me, it seems like this offense just might be a little bit more run centric. And if that's the case, it makes it tough to really get excited about Dak Prescott, particularly at captain, where like volume might be down unless we think he gets there a lot with his legs. But the way that I'm thinking through using these guys in tournaments is going to mostly be tied to their pass catchers, who I have a lot of interest in. So of course, if I have a Dallas Cowboys pass catcher at captain or multiple in flex, then I want some Dak Prescott exposure in tournaments. But for me, it's tough to get there at captain in small or large field, because 10.5% in a run-centric offense, where I think his pass catchers are likely to outscore him if he does have a big game. I think I just want my exposure there, to come from Lamb and Schultz and those type of guys, as opposed to trying to double it up with Dak or something like that.
Yep, even Pollard, who I think you could put in those like triple stack type lineups and things like that. I totally agree with you, and we haven't really seen the major ceiling out of Dak that we would be hoping for, especially to be in that captain's slate. And this like CeeDee Lamb role, for example, is so good that even if he's going to have very high captainship, I'd rather just play into that, I think, and bring Dak along with him than the other way around. Now, there's always, I don't want to be ruling out Dak at captain. Obviously, a Dak with Schultz and Lamb and another pass catcher like T.Y. Hilton or something like that makes plenty of sense. And if he does have a 3-touchdown, 300-yard game, that could be what you want if he spreads it around. But I'm with you on the captain. I wouldn't mind coming in under there while making sure I get my exposure in the flex. I feel like a little bit of a different conversation for me for Tom Brady, because of the way Tom Brady scores his ceiling games. It is a spread around type of 400-yard, 4-touchdown. I'm not saying that's happening tonight, but we've seen it happen multiple times in this Tampa Bay tenure. So 11% there. I'm more okay with it. Him on captain in tournaments. How are you feeling about TB12? Starting a playoff game at age 45 it is, or whatever it is here.
I mean, it's crazy, and the ceiling games are coming a little bit differently than they have in the past. Though this has kind of been the Tom Brady that we've started to grow accustomed to. He's going to be a short, low ADOT type of guy, high percentage targets, going to really help his receivers rack up PPR friendly volume. And by receivers, you can include the running backs there as well. But for me, it is a different conversation, because this is a team that ranks 7th in situation neutral pass rate, 4th in PROE. This Dallas defense isn't really a pass inviting defense. They're forcing teams to run against them more often than they are pass. And it's been a really stout defense on, in both aspects, on the ground and through the air. But for me, this is a team that I could see dropping back 45, 50 times would not shock me at all. And if you're telling me I get 45 to 50 Tom Brady dropbacks, I have some interest there. And the fact that they are targeting both running backs at such a high frequency, the fact that they can mix in Russell Gage and Julio Jones and Kate Otten is very cheap, makes it really easy, like we talk about on some of these other slates, to double up when you have a captain Tom Brady lineup, because it's more unique. You could play Tom Brady with both running backs, and I think that's enough firepower to get there. He could throw a touchdown to either one of them or to both of them. But then you also have the guys like Evans and Godwin, and certainly guys that we want to stack up Brady with. So for me, if I was just forced to choose just one of these quarterbacks that I want captain exposure to, for me, just given the way that the pass game environment projects to play tonight, I would prefer just to have Brady. I think the combinations are going to be more unique, and I think we're going to get more volume from him.
Yeah, I completely agree with you there. So nothing else to add. Obviously, we mentioned cash. I would lock both of them. I think you can make it happen as well here tonight. So, all right, going over to running backs, and it's kind of a unique situation where both teams legitimately have two running backs that you can make an argument for investing in that have serious roles in this offense. I want to start on the Tampa Bay side actually, because two cheaper plays and a guy that, when he's been in the playoffs, he has this nickname for a reason. In playoff Lenny has just absolutely dominated. And the other thing that I really think is working in Leonard Fournette's favor tonight, and I think they're incredibly impressed with Rachaad White and have been really happy with what he's given them. But when the chips are down, as you also talk about in your article, who are they really going to trust here? And the money down's on, who's Tom Brady going to trust in pass protection? As his check down partner, we've seen major games here. So I'm on Team Lenny tonight, even though he's chalkier, even though he's more expensive. I like Fournette here. How are you approaching these Tampa Bay guys?
Yeah, I'm with you. And Adam's talked about this a lot as well for these teams that were in the playoff hunt going, closing out the regular season. A similar situation with the Bucs now that they're here in the playoffs. In weeks 15 through 17, when the chips were down, and we can go all the way back to last year if we need to, but we'll take the more recent sample here and kind of run with that. Rushing share, it was Lenny. Red zone rushing share, it was Lenny. Attempts inside the 5-yard line, it was Lenny. Even target share, it's been Lenny. So I think, when the chips are down, when they need a win, I think that they trust Leonard Fournette the most. And he's $1,800 more expensive. I think both guys are completely viable tonight. Both guys are viable for lineups together, given the way that they project to score their fantasy points. But for me, if you're asking me to choose just one, if I need to get leverage on one and trying to find just an overweight position on one of these guys, for me, it's playoff Lenny. As much as I like Rachaad White and like projecting Rachaad White going forward in this game, when the chips are down, I think that they prefer to run with Lenny.
Agreed. And obviously, we don't know who's going to win the coin toss or anything. I like taking shots on first touchdown. Leonard Fournette, get it like plus 1,000 tonight. Obviously, I know a lot of people in the chat talking about over receptions. Obviously, if you're playing into that scenario, I understand that bet. But anytime touchdown for Leonard Fournette seems solid to me tonight as well. That's not to discount Rachaad White, who's been a very impressive rookie and someone who's equally involved in the pass game. You mentioned the low ADOT stuff for Brady right now. He's really relying on those outlets for the running backs. I expect them to take shots downfield to their big receivers that we'll talk about in a second, but I do think there's a floor here for both of these guys. So let's talk about playing them together and also just kind of the Rachaad White outlook in general. Like, we have our sample of Lenny in the playoffs. We don't know. Rachaad White has not been there. So,
Yeah, I agree. And I think one thing that the field is likely to do if they are setting rules and optimizers, or if someone's using the solver where you can set docks or boosts on players, I think one popular combination will be to dock Rachaad White in lineups where Leonard Fournette appears. I don't want to do that at all. I'm completely fine given their respective price tags. And like I said, the way that they score their fantasy points, 100% okay rostering them together. Rachaad White's 5,400. That could be a couple of drives given the way that Tom Brady likes to check down to his running backs. His running backs have accounted for 147 targets this season. That's second only to the Chargers. And of course, the Chargers are rostering Austin Eckler. So very different situation there. But a $5,400 Rachaad White who could rack up 4, 5, 6 catches is to me someone that's completely okay to play with Lenny Fournette. And during the regular season, this was a rotation where it was like series for these guys. So while I think, if they really need a big down or a big drive, they go to Lenny. I think while the game is competitive or if they're playing from ahead, it is probably more of, 1-for-1 series for series type situation than maybe even we're projecting right now or we're expecting, just given the way that they've utilized these backs in the regular season.
Yep. All right. Great point. All right. Dallas conversation. So obviously Tampa Bay's been a tough run defense, especially right up the middle for a long time. And that has me a little bit concerned with Ezekiel Elliott. These guys are only $200 apart. I know Silva, and somebody was talking in chat, Silva was talking about how he thinks Pollard is really banged up on one of the shows this week. I think that is something to consider. However, the ceiling on Tony Pollard these days is just so much higher than Ezekiel Elliott. I don't really want to play these guys together. Just take me through your thoughts here on the Dallas running backs.
This one is the one that's tougher to play together, and this is one where I would probably recommend a doc. But as you see there, the ownership is kind of in favor of where we see these two in terms of their base projection. They're only separated by $200, but you can see we've got Tony Pollard for 4.1 more fantasy points. I would imagine that has a lot to do with volume, but I would imagine it has more to do with high value touches and, just the ability for Pollard to earn more with those touches. It's actually been Ezekiel Elliott, who has led the team in rushing share, red zone rushing share, attempts inside the 5 and 10-yard line, while both of these backs have been healthy since the week 9 bye week. However, it is Pollard who is getting more of those high value touches as a receiving back. He's running more routes. He's going to dominate long down and distance situations. He's going to dominate 2-minute situations. So for me, if I'm forced to only choose one, it is Pollard, and I am terrified about Ezekiel Elliott being able to get anything going on the ground. I think if he does provide a slate-winning type score, it almost certainly has to come from him finding the end zone once, if not twice. But where they're separated by potentially 20% ownership, we could see Pollard steam up closer to 40 and Zeke come down to 20 or so. I don't necessarily think Pollard is 2-1 to outscore Zeke, although, I love Pollard a lot more as a player. So I do want some exposure in tournament lineups to Zeke Elliott, but I don't know if either of them really necessarily make the cash game cut for me.
Yeah, I mean, we know what the path is for Zeke, right? It's finding the end zone twice at least, which is obviously possible, right? Like pass interferences, you get down to the one, he's going to be the guy they're giving goal line carries to. So let's not discount that. And also, if you're playing a 5-1 or a 4-2 Cowboys, I want plenty of Ezekiel Elliott in that. George in chat mentioning elite GPP play, Elliott GPP play. Yeah, I think he is an interesting tournament play at much less ownership than Pollard. But I agree, the Pollard, ceiling here, it's hard to argue is not so much higher. And you see that in the projection, almost a 20-point ceiling for Pollard, 16 for Zeke, 3.5 point difference is a big deal here.
And this isn't one that I would completely rule out either, but this is a situation where I talked about I wouldn't dock Pollard, or I wouldn't dock Rachaad White and Lenny Fournette together. I would dock these two just given their price tags. It's a totally different setup, and the way Zeke is going to provide you a slate winning score is definitely going to take away from Pollard's ability to do so. Whereas like Rachaad White and Lenny could just rack up 7 catches apiece. I don't see that type of outcome for Pollard and Zeke together. So that's definitely a dock situation for me.
Yep. Agreed for sure. Yeah. You don't want to fully limit it, especially in like an MME portfolio. But I think a dock is fair. All right. Have Dallas pulled up here. So let's talk the Dallas. We'll do wide receivers and tight ends together. Let's talk Dallas pass catchers. Obviously, CeeDee Lamb, cream of the crop, has had one of the best roles in the league the second half of the season, especially target share has been out of this world. Really talented player, starting to hit his prime, I think. This doesn't scare me, this matchup either. So you see, obviously high ceiling, 56% total ownership, not that high in my opinion. 15% captain ownership is healthy. How are you handling CD before we talk about the rest of these Dallas pass catchers?
Yeah, this was kind of the same situation to me, and they're very different players, but a similar setup to me last night with Jamar Chase, who I knew was going to be high owned. I could see CeeDee Lamb's ownership creeping well north of 56%, maybe coming in closer to 10% more than that, and his captain ownership steaming up a little bit. But I didn't want to walk away from the Ravens-Bengals slate without exposure to Jamar Chase, regardless of ownership, just given the slate winning type scores that he has within his range of outcomes. And the same situation tonight for Lamb, who has a 28.8% target share, leads the team in air yard share, and the fact that he's going to run a lot of his routes from the slot. He's going to get away from the tougher perimeter coverage of the Buccaneers defense. I love CD tonight. It's tough for me to make a bear case against him. I guess the only way you can do that is that this Dallas team has just been a little bit more run centric than we would like. And that probably means his targets per game is going to come in closer to 9 or 10, as opposed to like 12 or 13 that we see from some of these very elite wide receivers in their ceiling games. So I think Lamb is a very awesome tournament play, regardless of ownership tonight.
Yeah, hard for me to disagree there. All right, moving down the list here. While obviously CD's got far and away the highest ceiling, probably of any receiver on this slate, obviously on Dallas side, you could make an argument, especially when you adjust for cost, that Dalton Schultz has a higher floor. The those targets have been fantastic down the stretch here. We know he's got a really good camaraderie with Dak. I think he's like 19 targets over the last 2 games. And Tampa Bay, I think one place that they are a little bit weak on their defense is covering tight ends. So at only 6,400, 32% total ownership, only 6% captain, which I think is interesting to me. Schultz stands out to me as well here.
Yeah, I think the Schultz ownership in total is pretty efficient, and probably a captain too. But you mentioned the floor. I think the floor is incredibly safe. His target share has been up since the bye week, 19.2% target share, 18.6% air yard share. More impressively, during that span, it's not CeeDee Lamb, it's not Michael Gallup, it's not any of these other guys that have led the team in red zone target share. It's the big body Dalton Schultz, who does lead the team in red zone target share with 31.0%, leads the team in end zone targets with 9. I think he's a really strong play, does have that, 7 catches for 80 yards and 2 touchdown type outcome. Fully capable of that tonight against a Bucs defense that has been a little bit more vulnerable to opposing tight ends. I don't mind getting exposure to Dalton Schultz at captain night where it's, 6.5% or so.
Yeah, same. And I should say, we didn't really talk about captain stuff at the running back spot. I like playing into Lenny captain over the field. And then if I came in under in flex, I'd be fine with it. Pollard, I'd be way more inclined to use Pollard to captain than Zeke. I think the range of outcomes for Zeke to be captain are smaller here, even when he's viable in flex. Does that make sense? Because I still think a game where Zeke's viable, I think it's like 70 or 65 total rushing yards and 2 touchdowns. And I still don't know if that's what you need for captain necessarily. Depends how the game goes.
Right. And that's fair. Like where Pollard could certainly rack up more PPR volume and things of that nature. To me, as I was looking down the board, it looked like the ownership was pretty efficient for all of these guys at captain. If I was building an MME portfolio, I'd probably come in around the field. But I agree with you on Lenny that I would probably want more than the 8.8% that we have projected.
Yeah. Okay. Other Cowboys receivers, you got a kind of 3-headed monster here of the secondary and tertiary guys. Gallup is still, by all metrics, the number 2 receiver on this team, plays a ton of snaps, but he has not been producing really at all. Obviously, still, first year back off the ACLs, people struggle a lot in that case. However, still a big play guy on the field for every snap with Dak Prescott just about at only 5K. Hard for me not to look at him as still a very strong tournament play. How are you looking at Michael Gallup tonight?
Yeah, I like using Gallup as in lineups where his player archetype and his profile kind of fits as a way where I need to get different at 1 or 2 spots. So, if I've got a lineup that's got 5K left and I've got the choice between some of these more popular options or Gallup, assuming it fits with the rest of the lineup, I don't mind using Gallup. To be honest, I was kind of hoping that ownership would be a little bit lower when I ran it. I was thinking as I was writing up the article that, maybe 15% or lower would be a little bit more palatable for somebody like Michael Gallup with his wider range of outcomes. So I can't say that I'm in love with it, where we project 20-ish%, but if he happened to get squeezed in smaller field contests, I wouldn't mind it there because he does have a wider range of outcomes. I think the more interesting names here are Noah Brown at 2,400 and T.Y. Hilton at 3K, who are going to round out 3 wide receiver sets. And I need to get somebody else's opinion here because as I was looking at this slate last night, Hilton's route participation has come up in each of his 3 games, 13%, 33%, 40%. And Browns has maintained his route participation as well, 78%, 57%, 72% over the last 3 games. However, T.Y. Hilton, I don't know where this came from, if this is just small sample bias or what, but he has a 28.6 target per route run rate in these last 3 games. So if you're telling me that his routes are coming up because the team wants to utilize him more, then I have a ton of interest in T.Y. Hilton at 3K and 7.9% ownership, where he has the same exact base projection and a higher ceiling than Noah Brown. So I don't know if I'm crazy. I don't know if this is just a product of a small 3-game sample where he's earning targets at, a relatively elite rate. But am I crazy for having interest in T.Y. Hilton tonight?
No, I don't think you're crazy at all. And in fact, when I was reading your article about the snap share and route participation numbers, that Noah Brown was still lapping him, I was very surprised because when you watch these games, it's T.Y. Hilton who's earning those targets. It's T.Y. Hilton who's flashing on tape. I've been very impressed with the way T.Y. Hilton has looked, considering he's on the street. He's, on the wrong side of 30, obviously, wrong side of 33 or whatever he is. Definitely. And he's a little bit more expensive, going to keep the field off him a little bit. I'm with you on liking T.Y. Hilton quite a bit here. I drafted him in a couple of the, gauntlets and mitten stuff on Underdog as a dart throw in Dallas stack. So I think he's a big part of what they're doing, and all good narratives coming out in regards to T.Y. Hilton out of Dallas camp. So Also, I'm kind of over the Noah Brown thing, man. I don't know what he does to get so much playing time, but I don't think he's a great receiver. Where T.Y. Hilton is at least showing that he is, still very, very solid player. So I'm with you there.
It's even if T.Y. Hilton's, if we can't project more route participation for him this week, it's still a 10.7% target share to 8.9% in favor of Brown, who is running, almost twice as many routes as T.Y. Hilton. So it's just pretty clear to me that at least during his time on the field, Hilton is at least more likely to earn targets. Maybe we can project that 40 to come up to 45 or 50% route participation. There has to be some type of merit-based playing time award here for somebody like Hilton, who is earning targets while he's out there. I like to think that maybe that 40% that we saw last week comes up to 50% or so. But even if not, I don't feel like I'm left holding the bag on Hilton at 7 or 8% ownership.
Yeah, I agree. We got chat with major theories. I say Noah Brown looks like CeeDee Lamb. That's why Dak is targeting him. There you go. Any chat also asking any interest in Michael Gallup captain in like 150 sets or anything like that?
Yeah, in a 150 set, the way that he scores, he's going to be, his air yard share is still up. He's still getting targeted deep downfield. The way that he scores is more conducive to like these boomer bust type games. So at 5K, I think it's pretty thin. I didn't look at what the projected was last. It's what, 2.7%. Seems about right. If you came in 4 or 5% in your sets, I wouldn't have any issues with that, knowing that you're going to accept a lot of zeros and a lot of low scores. But he does have that type of eruption game, at least in his bag.
Yep, agreed. All right, Ferguson, Hendershot. To me, those guys kind of cancel each other out. I don't know if you'd have a preferred dart there, or if there's better $200 plays for you on this slate.
Yeah, man, I think Ferguson's getting a little bit more opportunities. So for me, if you want to run a 150 set that has 5-10% max of somebody like this, it would be Ferguson over Hendershot for me, who might be a game day inactive. I don't know. I'm sure he's out there, but probably not going to be playing much on offense.
Cool, fair enough. All right, Tampa side, equally intriguing conversation with lots of names here. Let's start with Chris Godwin, who, yes, he's 400 less than Mike Evans, but coming in, as you can see, with 15% more ownership. We are talking DraftKings here, full point PPR. The way he scores is really strong on DraftKings. And I think for cash games especially, he'd be a priority for me tonight. How are you looking at Godwin before we talk about Evans, who I think is a more interesting conversation?
Yeah, absolutely. $400 cheaper than Evans. He's cheaper than the quarterbacks, cheaper than CeeDee Lamb in a high pass rate offense that has he's going to get a very low ADOT, very high percentage targets. I wouldn't be surprised if Chris Godwin came down with 8, 9, 10 receptions in this game, the way it projects to play out. Certainly a cash game option on tonight's slate, probably in that conversation with Brady and Dak as some of the top overall plays for cash. I think he's a fine tournament option. And if you're very cognizant of how you're playing around Godwin, because if you start with a Godwin captain, you're probably going to end up with Brady in that lineup as well. You need to kind of keep your total ownership, your product ownership in mind as you're building out those teams. But as you mentioned, for me, I think the more interesting discussion is Mike Evans, who I think could end up getting squeezed even lower than the 40.1% we have projected here. You see only 7% captain ownership on Mike Evans. And talk about a guy who is boomer bust. Mike Evans has a massive, massive ceiling. Although we know that game, that type of game for him comes with lower scores. Huge 36.7% air yard share, going to be targeted near the goal line frequently. 7% captain ownership on Mike Evans. I'm starting to wonder if that will even hold, but if it does, that seems like a fantastic place to start tournament lineups with.
Yeah, I wish we disagreed more, but we're in agreement there. And the other thing you can think about, the matchup doesn't scare you. And maybe that week 17 line, the 10 for 207 with 3, with a 51-point DraftKings performance, just maybe it sparked that ignition that we needed from the Brady Evans thing that we've been waiting for it to click all season. We know he trusts him, implicitly. What's the right way to use that word? And yeah, he's just a fantastic ceiling play because of the touchdown upside. So obviously I'm fine using these two guys together. I probably prefer to do that in Brady lineups. But yeah, I'm a Mike Evans fan tonight in tournaments.
I'm trying to work through this situation in my head. Like if that 7% can actually hold, like it would require, probably the quarterbacks to come down in terms of their total captain ownership, which might be possible. We've seen that more often, even with good, pocket passing quarterbacks like Dak, if we want to call him that. And with Brady, that ownership tends to come in lower because of the skill position options that are at least more attractive in terms of their raw ceiling. but it would require probably them to come down. It would require Godwin to come down. It would probably require Lenny to come down. And I just don't know if all of those factors happen. So if you told me that this Evans captain ownership flipped at 8 or 9%, I probably wouldn't be too surprised, maybe even up to 10. But if you told me it got somewhere like 15, I would be absolutely shocked. So I think that regardless, he comes in lower than Godwin and probably significantly so. And we know that when Evans hits, he's going to hit in a big, big way. So we've talked about this a lot on other slates. Like if you want to have around the field with that 40-ish%, but you want to have a really overweight position at captain, you can have 40% total and have 14 or 21 or whatever you like, whatever your leverage options are. You could have 21% of that exposure come at captain. And then, you've captured those ceiling games from Evans by just being way overweight on his captain ownership.
Yep. I think that's a great way to look at it. Other guys here, it looks like Julio Jones will be back. Russell Gage has been involved a good bit recently. To me, it's a clear max one spot. I know you agree with me because you wrote as such. But also, I'm a little worried these guys cancel each other out a bit, especially in the playoffs where Brady's looking for the guys he super trusts. I'm not saying he doesn't trust these guys, but I think the Evans, Godwin's, Fournette / White target share is going to condense a lot around those three options for whatever as the main guy. So I'm a little bit worried about the upside on these two guys, especially when you compare them to like kickers and things like that. But obviously not ruling them out. How are you approaching the Gage Julio guys here?
Yeah, Gage, Julio more so in play with Brady, captain lineups, certainly. And when you have Brady and flex, I think you can look at these guys a little bit more as well as secondary options. But yeah, you have Evans, you have Godwin. We talked about how often he's going to target both running backs. You have Auden, who we can just jump to next. But for me, certainly a max one position. I just don't find myself having a huge overweight position on either one of them unless I really need that ownership relief. But even so, like Gage is still coming in with 15.2%. I think that's pretty efficient. And Julio is just really tough to trust at this point. And $4,400 is certainly no giveaway at that price tag.
Yep, I agree. I don't have anything to add there. I think I prefer Julio just for like kind of the veteran, bigger play, upside, less ownership. You save a little salary as well, but no major lean there for me. Cade Otton, though, fascinating conversation here. Way too cheap. Way too cheap. I get that it's a tough matchup. Dallas is good against tight ends, but 1,800 for a guy that I think is very clearly taken over this role, even with Cam Brate, still having some snaps and things like that. There's just no production whatsoever. Where Otton has become, surprisingly as a rookie tight end here, has definitely become somebody that Brady trusts. Is actively involved in week in, week out game plan. Only 18% total ownership. Hard for me to look away from this spot here.
Yeah, I think part of the reason why that ownership isn't more than you might have expected is because salary just doesn't really matter as much. You're not going to see people need to find their way down into this range as much as you might expect. I think what we could see happen, as we talked about off the front, where the highest priced players on the slate, like Dak, like Brady, like Godwin, like Evans, if they do get pushed up a little bit in terms of their total ownership, it could squeeze out the middle a little bit more, the kind of 5 and 6-ish K range, and it could end up boosting up somebody like Cade Otton a little bit. But I think there's a safe ceiling there. I don't think it's going to get too much higher than what we have projected here. In smaller field, sharper contests with sharper players, it might steam up a little bit, but I still love it. As you mentioned, in week 16 through 17, before they completely punted on week 18's game, it was Otton who was in there for 84.4% of dropbacks, a 14.4% target share. And yes, it's a small 2-game sample, but a team high 41.7% red zone target share. I think for me, that shows that Brady trusts him a little bit. And I don't think he's going to completely dust off Cameron Brate. I think Cameron Brate will still be a little bit involved, and he remains a MME player, MME type play because he's stone minimum. But I think Cade Otton is one of the slate's best values tonight at 1,800. I think he should probably be closer to 3,400, 4K, somewhere in that range. And sub 2K, he's just way too cheap.
Agreed. And personally, I have no interest in Cameron Brate. I get it. So 1-game showdown slate, we shouldn't be ruling anyone out. I'd rather take a shot on Jake Ferguson, honestly, or the Tallis guy, whoever got. Like I personally would. I just think Brate is total dust. Otton's a much better player and play. And there's just so many guys to compete with targets on this Tampa Bay side of things. At least Dallas is a little bit more concentrated. Anyway, that's where I'm at with that. I don't know if you feel differently, but
yeah. I probably, the way that I'm going to be playing, I probably won't end up with much, if any, Cam Brate. The only pushback I would give you on that is if Brady's going to drop back 45 or 50 times in this game, Brate's probably going to be out there for, 20% of those routes, maybe around there, 15 to 20%. like at stone minimum, if it just so happens that you need all of the other expensive guys to make the lineups work, it might be okay. But I mean, it is tough. As you mentioned, Cam Brate is just complete dust.
Yep, agreed. All right, defense, kickers here. We'll talk about all of it as a whole. Can see Dallas certainly has a prolific pass rush. Tampa Bay's offensive line has struggled, to say the least, for the majority of this season. They are, I believe, getting Ryan Jensen back at center. I think that's a big deal tonight for them. But I think if you look at a mismatch here, it's certainly that Dallas pass rush versus Tampa Bay offensive line. You see only 11% total ownership on Dallas. They are a little bit pricey. How are you approaching the defenses here?
Yeah, I talked about the 5-1s off the top, with the Cowboys being the onslaught side in those. Love using the Cowboys DST in those lineups. I would be setting a rule to boost the Cowboys DST in Dallas onslaughts. I would probably boost them 35, 40% from the starting point, and then see how much that gives me and go up or down from there if I need to. It's just so much more likely, if that 5-1 type roster construction works, that Dallas's defense is a huge part of that.
Yep.
And we've talked about at length now that Brady's probably going to be dropping back a lot tonight. The Dallas defensive line is incredible. We expect them to get pressure. Even if Brady is better at limiting turnovers and mistakes than the average quarterback, it's still possible that a couple of strip sacks happen, INTs. If one of those goes back for 6, we just saw something crazy happen in last night's Ravens versus Bengals game, where they took a fumble recovery back 98 yards for a touchdown. You get one of those type of crazy outcomes. I think playing into that type of chaos at 11.8% ownership is kind of the way to do it. So I like the Cowboys DST as kind of a mid-tier pivot off some of the more popular skill position options in this range.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And we know what the formula is for beating Brady in the playoffs, right? So like the 5-1 thing, I totally agree with you. If they're going to get it done, it's going to be on the back of the pass rush. Like that is going to be the key to them winning this game. Take away the fantasy side of it, but if they want to win and win convincingly, it's going to be, getting Brady uncomfortable, getting him on his ass. The blueprint's been laid. All right. Bucks D, I think is also interesting, considering Dak's been making a lot of mistakes of late. This is in Tampa Bay. It's cheaper. You can certainly make the argument here. I like Cowboys D better in a vacuum, but we do have a $1,400 difference. Similarly, if I was playing a Bucks onslaught, I'd want exposure to their defense as well.
Yep, it's kind of the exact same discussion that we just had. The only difference is it's Dak Prescott, and this Cowboys offense just isn't nearly as pass heavy. So I don't think those opportunities are necessarily going to be there. But again, if you're projecting the Bucks to win, which you likely are if you're playing a 4-2 or a 5-1, then you're probably going to see more dropbacks from Dak and company anyway. So I like playing into those DSTs when paired along in the 5-1 type onslaughts, or even 4-2 makes some sense too.
Cool. Small field, cash, any interest in defenses, captain here? I don't think this is the game for it, but
no, but you bring up a perfect segue into cash, because Brett Maher just egregiously priced at 3,800 for kicking for the team that is the favorite, a team that I do expect to have success between the 20s, but might falter when they get into scoring position, as we've frequently seen. And I think Brett Maher is certainly a cash game must tonight, just given the way that he's priced and the skill position plays around him. I mean, you're looking at guys, and I try to make a bull case for T.Y. Hilton, but he's a better play than T.Y. Hilton. He's a better play than Russell Gage, who's $1,400 more expensive. He's a better play, I think, straight up than Michael Gallup, who is $1,200 more expensive. So yeah, Brett Maher is just a cash game must, given the floor and safety that the kickers provide in these single game contests.
Agreed. And then suck up on the other side, you get the ownership discount for sure, $200 more. I prefer Maher, I think, regardless. I'm not too worried about the ownership, but I think both guys are definitely in play here.
Yeah, and suck up might be in that cash game consideration conversation too. Tampa does rank 9th in field goals per game. If it does go back and forth and you see some, a little bit more scoring put up, then you could see suck up get there if, the Buccaneers aren't able to capitalize on scoring drives and they're kicking more field goals as well. It's just at this mid-tier, you look down to 1,800 for somebody like Kate Otten, who makes sense as a very strong value. But once you get back up into kind of that mid-tier between like 3 and 5K, just none of these skill position players give you, the warm, fuzzy feelings that you're looking for with the skill position value. So I do like both kickers tonight.
Yep. Cool. All right, Cody, that will just about do it from the analysis side. Time for flag plants. I'll give you the honors, my friend.
Yeah, I probably telegraphed this one as much as I oohed and awed over his 7.0% captain ownership, at least as we have it projected now. But
Yep.
Mike Evans, his downfield presence, his 12.9 yard ADOT, his team high 36.7% air yard share, a man that was put on earth to score touchdowns. I can't believe that he's going to be that much lower owned at captain than some of these guys. It's possible that I'm wrong. I hope I'm not wrong. I try to think infrequently I'm wrong, at least when it comes to projecting ownership for single game slates. Mike Evans at 7% captain ownership. To me, best play on the slate tonight. I think he's the optimal captain.
Yeah, we have a double like there for sure. I'm in on the Evans of it all as well. Somebody that would have been on my short list. I have a couple guys that I'm considering here. I think given the price and the captain ownership as well, I'm going to go with Dalton Schultz. I think and I get that maybe seems like more of a cash game play. I don't know. I think the tournament play is in there because I think there's like 10 catch games in the range, not to mention the likelihood of finding the end zone, somebody that he's been looking for in the red zone, and only 6,400 for what I consider to be a really nice floor ceiling combo in the matchup that you'd like to attack against Tampa. I like this game I like for Dak to drop back quite a bit tonight as well, even though I know they've been run heavy. I think Tampa maybe gets up to start this game. Tom Brady at home, wouldn't be surprised if they get some points on the board early. So then, maybe they just end up in pass mode a little bit sooner. And then, I like the price and the combination. Other guy I was considering was Lenny. I think that's less of a tournament GPP bro play given the ownership compared to Rashad, but I really like Lenny as well. But Dalton will be my official flag plan. Dalton Schultz.
A lot of good plays, a lot of interesting plays from that Dalton Schultz and up range, 6,400 and above. Hopefully we can find the value. Hopefully we can find the low owned pieces to make these rosters work because there's a lot of interesting options up there.
Yeah, agreed. There. Okay, that will do it for tonight. Enjoy this game. I think it's going to get a huge ratings. Obviously, you get Brady against the Cowboys. I think a lot of people have eyes on it. It's the end of a holiday weekend here in America. So hope you guys have all been enjoying your time off if you've had it. And hope you've enjoyed the weekend of football and hope it ends with a banger tonight. Good luck to all of you. We will, I think, be back for some sort of showdown show probably next Sunday for the Sunday game or at least the Sunday night game. But you'll stay tuned for news on that for divisional round. Best of luck in all your games here tonight. For Cody, I am Gary. Good luck, everyone.